Well, good afternoon. It's Tuesday. It's been a very busy day, if I do say so myself, and I would and I will, because I was directly involved in it. It is August the 20th, and this is Journal 145, and it is T+140. It was an interesting day on a number of different fronts. First, we had a brief Zoom meeting this morning on the book and the webpage, particularly getting ready to create that, put it up on the web, which is the last step before I can push the button and say publish. So that's exciting, and it'll also mark the marketing and publicity arm of getting a book out there and hopefully ensuring that it reaches the right market, the right audience for it. Also had an industry podcast that didn't wrap up all that long ago, actually. It went far longer than either the host or I thought it would. I was the guest in this particular case. I'm an icon in the automotive industry. That just means that I've outlived everybody else pretty much, and been writing and speaking long enough so that people actually listen occasionally to what I have to say and are interested in it. It was a great podcast, but we were talking about what really began my career as a writer and a speaker within the automotive aftermarket, within the repair community. And it was interesting because it was kind of serendipitous, as I've talked about probably before, in the respect that I was asked to do that after somebody else who had been asked before me at the last minute chose not to go through, not to follow up and actually create the state of the industry address they were looking for. And that all came about when our son Ryan was about 10, and our daughter Dana was about 6. And it was written out of a deep, overwhelming frustration with the industry that I really had come to love and enjoy. I enjoyed the work. I didn't enjoy the structure of the industry itself. And through a number of circumstances, not the least of which was benign neglect, in the respect that once they asked me to do this, they never bothered to check in with me to see what I was doing or to let me know what I could or should or shouldn't speak about. For all of you who may be hiring speakers, you can't imagine how dangerous that can be, because if you don't supervise, or at least communicate what the speaker should or shouldn't say, you're going to get whatever the speaker decides is important. And in my case, based upon the anger and the angst that I was feeling at the time, knowing that I couldn't really take care of my family based upon what I was able to earn working as a professional in this industry, in the automotive industry, as a mechanic and a technician, they were going to get 55 minutes of everything that was wrong with the industry. And realistically, the funny part about that was that it wasn't really about that. I mean, the podcast wasn't really about that. The podcast was really about the fact that the myriad number of things that I cataloged in that speech. Hang on one second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, probably 20 different specific items that I made mention of in the body of the speech, all of which were dangerously wrong with the industry, haven't changed at all in 35 years. And the same kinds of stresses and tensions and failures and problems that we were facing as an industry then, we're still facing today. And there are a number of reasons for that, and certainly a lot more reasons than we're ever going to talk about in 5 or 10 or 8 or 20 minutes. The speech that I wrote was 55 minutes, and it didn't do justice to the number of things that were wrong or the possible solutions. But it's interesting because from that moment on, and the speech was very well received. I wound up giving it 9 times that year, that in the 12-month period from the time it was first delivered over the next 12-month period. It was very well received by every group that asked to hear it. Things still haven't changed, and ever since that point in time, it's become a fascination of mine, almost a compulsion, as to how and why we function as a species when it comes to decision making, particularly when we do things that are counterintuitive, especially when we do things that are obviously not in our own best interest. And it doesn't have to be within the automotive service industry, working as a technician or a mechanic. It can be in any way. I mean, there are libraries of books that have been written on this. So one of the best of which is a book by Chip and Dan Heath called Switch: How to Change When Change is Hard. It turned out to be one of my favorite books because it helps and it hopes to address those issues and at least shed some light on the difficulties involved in changing and breaking these patterns and habits that inhibit us from being our best selves. If that sounds harsh, I apologize, but in many ways you have to agree with me, I think. And it's fascinating to me also the fact that the first book that I picked up to start reading after I'm finally able to concentrate, to focus well enough to actually make my way through a book now, which is really odd because I've certainly brought enough books with me, either electronic or paperbacks or hardcover books with me to keep me busy for the entire time I was away, but I could not function, couldn't read them. I just didn't work well. It didn't work right. The book I'm reading now is another Dan and Chip Heath book called Decisive, and it's a guide to make better decisions in work and in life, as the subtitle would suggest. And I'm just a couple of chapters into it, but so far it's helping a lot. And I know people that are being treated for diseases that are difficult, dangerous, potentially lethal, who don't always make what you would think are intelligent decisions. And I'll give you a really good example of that. We know somebody who was a heavy smoker, diagnosed with bladder cancer. We know that there's a correlation, a statistical correlation that exists between smoking and bladder cancer, and yet this individual smoked constantly, continually, up until the time it took him. The cancer took him. How and why that's inexplicable to me. I mean, I don't understand it. And to a large degree, the answers aren't really that difficult. I mean, we tend to think of all of the choices that we have as being binary, as being yes or no, or up or down. We don't think, we limit the scope of exploration because that makes it easier, but in so doing, we neglect everything else that's possible, all the other possibilities that are out there. Not sure whether it was in switch, or whether it was in another book that I read before I went into treatment. But it's simply one of the easy tools is to simply just turn around, instead of saying either this or that, turning around and saying, well, what if? What if we did this? What would happen? To expand the possibilities rather than limit them. Or saying, what if you couldn't do that obvious choice? What if that obvious choice was not open to you? What would you do then? What other choices would you have to look for, and what other might exist? So it was a great podcast in the sense that I'll be thinking about all the things that Carm and I talked about for about an hour and a half, for days after the podcast is completed. But it was interesting because I can see where a lot of people that I know that are plagued with the same problems that I've had over the years, making what I consider to be good decisions, or how they could benefit from some of the things that I've already learned in both of those books and other books that are focused on making better decisions and the decisions that we make. So while you're thinking about better decisions, I'll see you guys tomorrow. In the meantime, stay well and take care. Those are two good books. There's lots of others that are out there. And if you're ever interested in the reading list, let me know, and I'll start culling names off the, 400 books that are surrounding me that you can't see right now. Okay, stay well, take care. Till tomorrow, adios.